Okay, and hello, I'm finally getting this next one out, and just like the last one, it is interrupted by me going in various different directions during the filming. This was October 4th, and I came to this and started from there. And this concerns these doors here, which currently are shown as 90/82, so 7'6" wide. And they're shown as 3-panel doors. And recall, with these 3-panel doors, they will only operate in that direction shown. And additionally, the ones we're using, which is this 7'6" model, that neck clear opening is 21.5 or 21 3/4 wide, and that comes through the center there. And I think to begin, because I didn't like this, once this had been established, that we needed that. And you can tell from looking at this really that it looks to me like there's definitely some room in this direction for that to go that way and not get into this casing. So that 5'5.5" should definitely be field checked. But returning to these doors, so with the 3-panel you can have them both going that way. And if you go to a 2-panel, this goes to a 2-panel door. Instead of being 90 inches wide, it's 84 inches wide. But with the 2-panel door, it can slide in a variety of directions. And that's what this next little short section is. Both panels can move that way. They can move toward one another from the margins. And this is the pathway that makes it a little bit more clear. So they can slide that way. They can both slide that way. They can be like that. And that's what I'm showing right there. And I made them smaller because I didn't like how they were hanging over here. This also gives us more space on that wall for switches. So I named that, once I changed those doors from the triple, because with these doubles, you, instead of the 21 3/4 inch wide access, you're going to be into a 34 inch wide access. So we're increasing the access by well over 50%, and probably increasing the glass area, actually removing some of that framework and replacing it with glass. So that was when I renamed that 1204B, and I just went with that for now, where that was the pathways. I kind of preferred this for the pathway here, but you know how you're going to set up this furniture in here. You can have almost 4 switches when it's like that. And then I added those windows because I felt like I didn't want you not to have this view that's available at this corner. So I added those windows at the corners. And eventually I make them wider. I was trying to get something out here to look a little more similar. I just settled on that. And then I took another look at this spiral staircase, and I wanted to be correct on this. And I modeled a staircase built based on one of those brochures. But at first I was hoping we'd get 14 risers, so that those risers would be 7.5 or so, or 7 3/4. But as it turns out, we just can't get under that upper platform, because that upper platform can't be attached one riser down. It has to be attached level with the top floor. And once I discovered that, and then there was a situation where I could see that these sides were intruding at various points. The windowsill on this window, for example, and this here and up here. So I widened that out on both of those. So a 64.5 inch clear opening. So you would be able to have a couple inches intrusion basically with any of that bric-a-brac. But that can probably be squeezed down some from there. And so we go from 14 risers down to 13 risers, and that rotates this around 30 degrees, and now the bottom of the stairs coming out like this, parallel with this wall, and facing this way here, connecting with the platform at the top. And these windows were widened out, and this was based on a little series of photos from the outside where I wanted to refine some of these details out here with regard to these windows and the interfaces here. So I've added a corner board. So I added a corner board that wasn't even shown, and I made that corner board pretty wide, 7.5, wide enough for that beam. And it looked to me like that was, and then just united those doors like that. And that's where I left that outside. When you look at this though, one of the things I was doing is this is your board and batten here, which is all painted the same presumably. And then I have these casings, and the corner board's painted darker, and you can probably lay that board and batten out in the best possible way at the end. I have it like this, and maybe something like that is the best way to do it. And on this side, these gaps are so small there would be no battens at all there. It would be more like that. And then when I got to that point at the first floor, I made this walkthrough going up those stairs and coming back down. But before I did that, I had done a chunk of things up here where I looked at this interface and that door and made some adjustments in here. I just adjusted this roof plane, or that ceiling plane, to meet the corner of that wall rather than move this wall back. I did that a variety of places up there on the second floor. And that got us to that at the second floor where we had this 2'6" wide, because this was left over from when this was a full height wall here. So that gets widened out to 3 foot, at least in this, for this walkthrough. That got widened out to 3 foot. And now that second floor was setting up something like this at 1204C, which is probably after I added those windows, it became 1204C. And I modeled those stairs and put that in. And there were other varieties of these upper platforms. They have this one here that comes off the side, so at that second floor, that could be attaching right here. But I did it this way. This, whatever they're calling this, B platform or D platform, and a mounting plate there. And I modeled those stairs and looked at how it was going to rotate. And at first I was thinking you could step down on this landing. That doesn't happen at all, so that was not applicable. When I finally got it together, that could not happen. That landing cannot happen one riser down and attached to these. And even if it could, it doesn't provide the headroom at the bottom with this 30-degree stair rotation. So I abandoned all that, and we arrived back where we were with that 13 risers. And I was making sure you could see they were hitting the sides of this framing at that width. Finally, when I come back here after this little walkthrough, that'll get us back to October again from today. But this is how this first floor is shaping up now. I haven't sized these members here yet, but I'm assuming this roof will be framed with 2x6s, and these ceilings will probably have to be 2x8s. That's going to be stick framed. Otherwise, these are just trusses over here, and you'll have to decide that. Returning to that walkthrough at that point and what this looks and feels like without making any of those changes, and I will make some commentary and discuss along the way. Return to these two walkthroughs. 13 risers is going to be 8.34 per riser, so it's still a reasonable rise. And up here, all of this is based on the idea that that existing ceiling where the new skylights are going in stays at 2x6 framing with the drywall applied right over the framing, and presumably the inspecting authorities were able to get this through in terms of insulation. But as it is, the front and rear roofs of the new portion are framed in 2x8, and this is still 2x6 over here. And that's one of the reasons there's that dividing wall when you come up. But secondly, that dividing wall, we might have to have some of that just to provide some structural support for some beams that may or may not have to happen up at the ceiling, up in the roof level, which was all stuff I covered really well before this, back in October, that roof framing up there. And again, nothing's been done in the kitchen except that the sink at the island has been taken out, and I've made sure that the ovens are in their place. And you'll have to specify what you want on those ovens, because your kitchen designer will probably do that with you. However, before that, back in October, in mid-October, I had looked at this roof framing, and I'll make this as short as possible considering the number of these I put together. But I assumed on this valley here, we would be just framing on top of that existing 2x6 roof framing. And the openings are something like this. Underneath here you can see where the opening has to be, and I felt like they were not going to let us do this like this. They would want a ridge beam up here because of being able to resist this thrust. I don't think that's the case. I think if an engineer looks at this, they can probably put this together without this, and even without this, by just providing the right resistance against the thrust of these things going down. Whether that can be done without any of these supporting walls or not, because you may not want any of this supporting walls in here. But I felt like we probably were going to have something like this up here. And this is how the program frames this dormer. I don't know if that's how you'll do it or not. I didn't do it that way. I put that together a little differently. This is this area over the kitchen. These are those existing joists, and this is that girder truss over. And then there's existing joists out here, and what you do with that is up to you, whether you take that all off and put trusses over the whole thing, or whether you leave that existing framing in there like that. The way they resisted, this is shown with the truss, the way they're resisting that thrust is with flat 2x6s coming back, or 2x4s coming back here and nailed to this framing here. And we definitely have the opportunity to do that with our new roof framing over here. But as it is, this is shown with the girder truss inserted, and all those existing framing staying over there. That's the existing old ones there, staying over that area. You have to cut off a few of them where they go out there. We haven't looked at that kitchen floor plan again yet. But that was how I framed this dormer, like that, with a cross piece, and that would be suspended. At this point I was showing this all in 2x10 framing to accommodate hopefully enough insulation. The closed cell spray foam contractor person told me they can get this accomplished in 2x8. They can get the required insulation and get it passed with 2x8 framing like that. But I had shown it as 2x10 back at that point. And then we had, this was that double member across here. It doesn't have to be that big in the first place, with hangers on it, etc. And starting to look at the rest of that roof framing at that point, if we were going to have a beam, a regular ridge beam in there, I sized that, and I did a whole bunch of other things with regard to what it would take to frame this if we were going to provide support down here. And that's what I assumed that we were going to have to do, that we would not be able to frame that completely open. I'm not going to waste a whole bunch of time on this, except that I calculate these loads, where they were coming down, and the members that would be required to frame this like this. And we still have that valley beam as well to think about, and they're going to want that doubled. And so I had come up with something like this at that point. providing the framing up there to provide support for that ridge beam and the stuff coming this way and this valley rafter. And it very well may be that all of that can be done without this roof support up here. But I don't know that right now. But that gets us through that section. I'm going to cover a few more things in this film. And this was in October still, and I was still using 2x10 framing on the new roof planes over here and here. But if that can be insulated with 2x8s as framing, I moved all that stuff over here to this plan and converted everything to what it would take to do that in 2x8s. The 2x8s, most of these can all be SPF. These ones out here, these doubles here, have to be Southern Pine #1, and all of these rafters have to be Southern Pine #1. And I meant to mention when this slide came up, you can see that there's all sorts of opportunity to resist the thrust from these rafters, including these double ones. This is 6 foot from the outside of that wall to where we start having finished interior space. Additionally, if we wanted to, this wall here can be an intermediate bearing wall, as can this one and this one. And if that is the case, if these are become that way and some of that load is transferred to those members below that go this way, then this doesn't nearly become a problem, but it already can do this whole thing in the 8-inch or 9-inch depth of these rafters. But whether or not we need that beam at the top, certainly I think these are capable of being able to resist the thrust. We have the ceiling joists up there as well, and though these ones down here that were called out as 2x8 Southern Pine, that's just because they were clear span, and I think we can almost assume that we will make those have a mid-span here. And I don't feel qualified to say one way or another whether that would be the case, whether it would be mid-span support and whether that would help the cause, and how exactly the ends of these members here are handled. But this also has ceiling ties across here, and all of that only matters if you want this completely open through here with no vertical support here in any event. And this is what this particular valley rafter here shapes up as. But you can, if you bevel that at the top and the bottom on both sides, you'll be able to push that up just enough and it will still pass. 9 inches actually passes. And so if you bevel that on both sides and nail it together, you can move it up like that. And this is where this was at this time, and this was still this 2x6 roof framing on this original plane. And then I assume let's either we reframe that with 2x8s or it's furred down for insulation purposes to 2x8s. And these walls were not symmetrical with that window opening, which is symmetrical with the roof ridge, so that was moved back 3 or 4 inches. And then the window was brought down 6 and brought down another 6, so the windowsill comes down to 12. From inside the exercise room, it looks like the glass would be right at that 18-inch point where it has to become tempered. I don't know if these 65-inch windows would have to be tempered or not, but more on that in a minute. And that wasn't by design, that was just the way that worked out, all of these 35-inch measurements. But unless they can do that, and I don't know how they'll support that end of that valley rafter, but if they can do that without any of those members, then that would be great. But if not, here are those members that are holding up what's necessary up there. And really all we need is the 3.5-inch column coming down through here. And that shows a door in that wall. So that's the bare minimum we can get by in terms of structure. But I'm not sure, you may have wanted a lot more structure up there in the first place. So that's the bare minimum structure there, with just that 4x4 at the corner. And some variations on that here. But if we want to try to close that room off from this stairwell, we can even a 2-foot door is squeezed in there. It'll fit in there, but it's squeezed. If we angle that wall, we can get that to a 28, and you have this 80-inch clear path through here where you're not bumping your head. So there's some walkthroughs as well with this second floor. And I decided to run these all at the end and piece them together where it makes sense for you to get a good feel of that second floor. With that, this pretty much should review that entire second floor, definitely to the extent that we need for construction drawings. I think we're going to want an engineer on this regardless of what's happening here, just for the other things, just to make this go through permitting process a lot smoother, because there's a lot of different things going on and they'll question them, and it'd be better if someone looked at the critical items in any event. But maybe they have to look at the entire thing, I don't know. But here are these walkthroughs then in various bits and pieces. For this last and final walkthrough, which is the most closed of the plans, I made this door the same as this, a 30-inch. But first I have to double check and see if that's going to hit those slopes at all when it's in that position, for example. Oh. I see how it would be like that. It's actually not going to come close to it at all. But this means this door can be open like that, back against that wall. Because if it hinges on the other side, you have a problem. I don't know if it can open up that far, but that doesn't really work very well. So you could do it that way if you want to, and it wouldn't hit these slopes. So I'm going to leave it like that for now and run this presumably this last walkthrough. And I did return to this plan one more time after that walkthrough in case this closed studio was what was wanted, and there was no way we were going to accomplish that with a square wall like this. There just wasn't the space. So I went back to 1215E for that. But looking at this spiral staircase and that top landing, I would think, you can see I have the steel frame holding that up, but I would think that that can be designed that we can run our floor out like that, and maybe put an edging around it and unify that whole space out there. Because even when we had those funky walls, this was, you could still walk across here if you wanted, but there was no room to put any doors in those. But unifying that whole area seems like a good idea. And that just about does it for this film. And I think beyond perhaps some more elaboration on that, if this were to become an actual balcony, I think we've covered the second floor about as thoroughly as we need to right now. And outside, there was just two quick looks. If that balcony does happen, not a balcony, if that door happens, probably those casings are a little bit bigger, 5.5. But that's it for this film. And this all changes over here. But this is what this is looking like right now based upon the different things I covered. And you can adjust those according to your whim or will. That's all. Thanks very much, and I will be in touch, I'm sure. I'll begin to work on this immediately, and in a couple of days I'll show you where we are with it.